recording right now. So the session is being recorded on the cloud, and I will be sharing the session, the recording, with everyone who participated. So please keep yourself on mute throughout the time that we are sharing this information and presenting. On the other hand, we will be asking few questions. We will be asking for a lot of interaction, and we would love for you at some point when we ask you to unmute yourself, to chat with us, to talk to us, and to interact using the poll or the chat box or unmuting yourself. The other thing is, if you don't have with you a notebook, perhaps it's time for you to go ahead and grab that, because we're going to be sharing with you a lot of insights, and some of them are quite scientific, and maybe it's worthwhile for you to actually note this or go ahead and grab this information. Finally, the session is going to be about 15 minutes, and we're going to be having 15 minutes after that of Q&As. As we mentioned on the actual invite to everyone, that we are actually making giveaways at the end. So for you to qualify for this $500 worth of giveaway, please stay with us until the end for you to actually qualify to enter the the option of having the $500 giveaway. And just playful out, enjoy it, learn and ask and interact and sit back and relax. So I'm gonna be, without further ado, passing it on to Mariam.
Yeah. So let's take a zoom out and look at our career life. And for the majority of people, depending on where you are and what's your education system, usually people graduate from university around the age of 22 years old. And that leaves us with 43 years of actually a career life, as in the majority of places, the retirement age is at 65. While we know that some people actually start a whole new career at the age of 65, we want to also be focusing on what happens and what are some statistics about the career change and career transitions even before the retirement age. So the average person actually changes their careers 5 to 7 times during their work life. That's around every 6 years, or 6.6 to be accurate years, that people actually change their jobs and careers, not just their jobs. So if you look at your life and how many times you will be changing that for the majority of time, that's based on today's statistics. Maybe it was different like 20 years ago and even more than that. But in today's world, as career choices are increases, as entrepreneurship opportunities are increasing, as COVID-19 and similar world trends are actually happening, and digitalization and all that development is happening, 30% of the society are actually going to be changing their careers, or at least changing their jobs every 12 months. That's a huge number of times that you're actually going to be going through this career transition. So I want you to be imagining the whole process of leaving your comfort zone, leaving what you already knew and had experience in, and starting all over again, something new. Given those statistics, think of how that process feels like for you. What emotions come up for you? What thoughts come up for you as you see this, and the number of times that you will be going through career transition, or at least job transition. Building on that, Gallup statistics, and those are world statistics, show that only 15% of the workforce are actually engaged and satisfied at their jobs or current careers. That is such a small number compared to the workforce. And for some people, the impression by seeing those numbers is kind of like, okay, so if almost everyone is unhappy in their job, it makes it feel normal that I'm unhappy in my job, or I'm not in the right place, and that's how things should continue to be going. But that's not what we're here today. 58% of those unsatisfied people actually are willing to go through a pay cut in their income in order to make that career transition towards a more fulfilling and a more satisfying career for themselves. The rest of the people are not willing to take that huge step. We will be going through more and more details today together in order to be seeing how to increase that courage and that willingness to actually pay whatever cost today that we need to be going through in order to have a more fulfilling and a more financial viable career on the long run.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing all this information with us. So let's talk for a second here about the actual myth and the misconceptions. What are they? So what are the actual myth and misconceptions? Throughout the research that we have done, the information that we have received from yourself who signed up for this webinar, thank you for that, and throughout the work that we have done with professionals when they are transitioning their career, we gathered a lot of data that relates to what are the myth and the misconception that could be stopping the person to actually go ahead and transition their career. And we gathered some of the top ones over here. So the first one that I wanted to share with you is, of course, uncertainty. We don't know what's happening with the corona. Before the corona, there was an uncertainty related to a financial crisis, perhaps. There was always going to be an uncertainty. And what do you do in this uncertainty? In most cases, people get to stay in their comfort zone because it's safer. And maybe that's okay. So the other one is, I don't have what it takes, right? I don't have what it takes, meaning I don't have this skill set for me to be able to transition. I don't meet the requirement in the job description that was advertised for a particular job that I wanted to have, or I don't have what it takes for me to become a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, to move and open my own company, for example. I don't have what it takes. What was the other one? I don't have clarity for what I'm gonna do. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I know that I'm not happy where I am, and this is something that I have experienced myself, but I don't know what is it that I wanna do. So why bother? Financials. Financials is another layer that you will be adding, perhaps on top of the uncertainty. So I have financial responsibility, and I'm going to be making a daring guess here, or an assumption, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to say that all of you have financial commitment over here, or responsibility, that the moment you're going to be triggering that financial commitment level, you're going to be actually amplifying the level of uncertainty. And the final here that we wanted to share with you, which is last but not least, that I'm just too busy. I'm too busy. I have a family, I have kids, I have my job, I have my activities, I have my friends, community, whatever. I have Netflix series to keep up with. So I'm kind of quite busy, and I don't have time for me to actually go ahead and think about another career or think about different directions in my career. But I want you now, for the sake of the exercise throughout this whole webinar, to use your imagination with me and think about a dream job. Could be a dream job or could be a dream career. Even if you don't have a clear one in mind, think about something that would actually make it makes you feel fulfilled. So imagine, you don't have to have it clearly, what's the job description, what do you do, what's your title, what are you doing. Imagine that you are actually having a job or a career, and what are the emotions that goes around that career. So once you imagine that, I want you to carry that with you throughout the webinar. Imagine as a post-it note that is stuck on you. So every time we're going to be going through that webinar, we're going to ask you to refer to this dream job or career. Okay? So use your imagination on that one. And let's start with our first poll for today.
So you're going to be finding 2 questions appearing as a poll for you right now. And the first question is, are you satisfied with your career? Rate yourself, knowing that 1 is, I'm super satisfied, and 10, no, I'm really miserable in my current career. And the second question would be, do you have a clear vision for your ideal career or not? Using 1, I do not have any clue or clarity for my vision. And number 10 is I have a very clear vision for my ideal career. So we're going to be giving you a minute to do so, and we're going to be sharing the results with you afterwards.
So please go ahead, everyone, and contribute. We are a very small and nice group. So I have only 20% who have contributed. So if you don't mind, just interact with us, contribute, and that's gonna be actually helping us to get a bit more clarity in terms of where you are and where you wanna be heading. And that we will make a full circle on that as we move forward in this experience. Alrighty, few more seconds and I'm gonna be sharing the poll results. So what do we have here? Go ahead, Miriam, if you wanna share.
So for the first question, we can see that 25% are almost satisfied with their career. 50% are midway, we can say, and 25% are really dissatisfied with their current career. If we start looking at the second question about the clarity of the vision of our ideal career, 25% have no clue what's the next step or where are they heading to. 25% are midway, and another 25% are midway but closer to having a clearer vision of what their ideal career is. And 25% are almost there. As we can see, so far there are 0% people who are actually very clear on what the next steps are, and they're just waiting for that move. We're going to be exploring together what could be the reasons behind those results today.
Fabulous. So fabulous results. Thank you everyone for sharing with us. So clearly we can see that the majority of this group is actually not not satisfied in their current career, and it's a sporadic opinion here, but we can also say that 2 above 5 and 2 below 5, so it's kind of a half-half with regards to their clear vision. So what we're gonna be sharing next is based, so these are obviously the questions which you obviously answered them. Thank you so much. So I want to kind of activate here a kind of engagement, which perhaps you could unmute yourself if you want, or leave in the chat box. But because we are a small group, by all means, unmute yourself and please share with us, and let's exchange what is the biggest barrier for you to achieve the vision, or for you to achieve your ideal career. What's the biggest obstacle that you have in your life today for you to achieve your ideal career? I have Salwa that unmuted herself.
Yeah. Yes. My biggest obstacle is my age. I'm 59 years old. I'm still active. I'm up to date. I keep developing myself. I'm up to date with the latest with technology. I'm studying my MBA, and I'm graduating in 2 months' time. It's not like I'm someone old, out of date. No, not at all. And people who know me, they know that. But how to convince the employer who doesn't see me that I'm suitable for the job? And with this ATS, the applicant tracking system, which I think is a disaster, I do not pass the first filter. The date of birth is enough to kick me out of the selection. I was reading about this ATS. I read a lot about it, and it's got keywords that it keeps looking for, and it keeps looking for keywords by the number of times the keywords are mentioned in the CV in comparison to the words in the job description. And the conclusion that if I take the advertisement, the job advertisement, it in my CV, I'm going to get the higher score. I'm tempted to do that just to prove myself that it's really a lot of rubbish. I belong to a generation where things were not, things were more real. I used to read every single CV. I used to read every single CV. I was the HR person, and it made so much difference to see the people, to see the actual CV formatting, how what it said, the the automatic part has changed everything into um, a fake situation. Uh, Set this aside, my biggest obstacle is really my age, and I don't know how to overcome that.
Okay, no, fabulous, Salwa. Thank you for sharing so much with us, with all this real, obviously situation and obstacles, basically. Stay tuned. We will be happy to kind of reconnect, throughout this webinar. There's been a lot of option for interaction where you can put your case on the table, and we could potentially unpack and interact more. Anyone else would like to share with us some of their one of their biggest obstacle? And just for the sake of the time, maybe you just want to say what would be in one sentence your biggest obstacle, or
Yeah,
leave the comment.
I'm actually 64, and I changed my career at 62. So I think age is in your head. I do hear that. My biggest obstacle is that what I would like to do, I can't earn money and there's no security in it. Right now I have a very secure job, but it's a very soul destroying job. So I would say the fear is, because of the pandemic and the world that we live in, what I would like to do is entertainment. And there is no security in it, and there's no, and I've done it before, I've tried it before. It's very hard to earn money to support myself. So that's my biggest, the financials and fear.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much
Fabulous.
for sharing.
Thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else before we move on?
Yes, I want to share my obstacle. My obstacle is not having the clarity of what I want to do. I feel I'm interested in many things, but I don't have something that a real goal that I want to achieve. And also, I'm working in software industry, and it has many privileges and many opportunities. So I have a fear to leave this.
Okay. So what we know is
Fabulous.
better than what we don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, awesome. So just to move on here, and thank you everyone for sharing your insights. Perhaps we can see what were the biggest categories that we had.
Yeah. So based on your answers in the form and based on each of our individual experience with career transition, and personally based on what our personal experiences have shown us, we've divided all the roadblocks under 4 main categories. And the first one is actually the mindset. What's happening inside of our heads and our thoughts is one of the biggest barriers for us and roadblocks towards creating that transition. And some examples of that mindset that is really not helping us actually move forwards with that career transition is, I don't have what it takes to succeed. Believing that things are not to be learned, but it's either I have them or I don't have them. I'm not smart enough, not believing that I could be up to what it takes. It's too late for me to start. And I guess some of you have already shared their resonance with that statement as well. And this is all around us from our experience as well. So the mindset, how we are thinking, actually leads to whether we actually take the steps or not. And Henry Ford has that very famous quote that says, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. So be very careful with the mindset that you have for yourself and for your actions, for your career and for your personal life as well.
Fabulous. Uncertainty. We know what we know. What we don't know, right? So there is a lot of uncertainty as part of the things that we are actually blocking us, stopping us. There's a lot of uncertainty in the environment. We spoke about that earlier. We don't know what's on the other side of the comfort zone. And what is the right career? Like in terms of clarity, I think someone just mentioned right now, excuse me, I don't remember the name, but obviously, we're talking about clarity, the direction, what's going to be next. So these are real obstacles that are actually stopping people. So here's the thing. The number one thing that actually blocking us from not knowing, not taking the risk, or actually procrastinating is uncertainty, meaning we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So that not knowing what's on this other side of the uncertainty is actually a driver for us to stay in the stasis mode. The other thing, as part of the classification from the many information that we have received, is capacity. So the busyness, the routine lifespan, the layers that we have created, they are all actually creating obstacles, because there are shackles that we have. So you are not able to kind of move around because of all these commitments that you have, the layers of commitment that you have created, that's not going to enable you to actually go ahead and shift or move forward or even think about something outside of your comfort zone.
And lastly, but not least, is the financial aspect. Thinking that you have too many responsibilities that you cannot risk. Thinking of your family members that you're taking care of, or even like the rent that you need to be taking care of. Feeling that you don't have the preserve, or you have not planned the financial safety in order to take that jump, and thinking that it's either black or white. Either I'll make it and I have that 100% of my income still being stable, or thinking that it's going to be completely the opposite and I cannot afford it. So we're going to be looking into that even more deeper later on.
So about the saboteur, Miriam, can you share with us a bit more?
So when we're talking about career change or career transition, the first thing that happens, and happens to all of us, is that we trigger something that we call our saboteurs. It is very normal with every change that we're...
Sorry, Miriam, you broke up a bit. You were talking about the change. So until you come back online with us.
Can you hear me now, Lawrence?
Yes, now we can hear you back.
Okay, thanks. Sorry for that. So as I was saying, it's very normal when it comes to career change or any change basically in our lives. As we start moving from our comfort zones and stepping out into the new change or the new reality, we all get triggered by fear. Fear of whether we'll make it or not outside of our comfort zone. Fear of whether or not we'll actually fail or succeed. That fear triggers what we call inside of us as the saboteur voice. That saboteur voice is actually just like you see in the picture in front of you. It's a voice that's actually hindering us, trying to make us stay back in our comfort zone because it's trying to make us feel safe and secure. But it's not always that we need to prioritize safety and security. So just being conscious that this is our saboteur voice, we're going to be understanding more and more in the next slide. What is the saboteur? What's the intention? And where is it coming from? But one thing to remember from this slide is this image. Your saboteur voice would give you that emotion and that feeling that it's dragging you behind. It's keeping you from moving forward. And every time you start to try to take a step forward, you're actually being pulled back by that saboteur voice. Are you relating to that? Are you noticing your saboteur voices? Are you being conscious and aware of things like, I cannot do that. There's too much competition out there. I won't be able to make it. I only have experience in X or Y or Z. Those are all examples of saboteur voices.
Yeah, certainly. And I would like to also make a general assumption that all of us out there have the inner critic, which is another word for the saboteur, that actually tells us all these negative thoughts about us and about what we cannot do, more so than what we can do. Let's talk quickly about the anatomy of the saboteur. Like, how does it actually work? So a bit of science here. Obviously, I'm not a science graduate, but enough to know to share with you. So we have here a picture of a neuron. In our beautiful brain, believe it or not, we have 100 billion neuron in our brain. There is 100 billion neuron. And each neuron is connected to another neuron through a synapses. Each neuron, on average, has 5,000 synapses that can have 5,000 different connection. 5,000 different connection. The Hebbian theory says that neurons that fire together, they wire together. When I say fire, there are electrical signals that go from neuron to another. And this is triggered by an event. And this event triggers a thought, a reaction, a emotion, a feeling, whatever that is. So when two neurons are kind of reacting the same way, they start being connected through a synapse. And when that happened, bringing you back to the notion of the saboteur, what Mariam was talking about before, an event happened, you have a specific trigger in your brain, a pathway that something happened, I'm gonna feel or react that way. And you have a certain pathway that you take, a trajectory that you take. When that pathway happen, recur on and on and on again, that turns into a habit. We're not talking specifically about a habit, a physical habit. It could be even emotional habit. It could be a thought habit. It could be a sabotaging habit, right? Of thoughts, basically. And this is how the saboteur get actually engraved in our brain. So what happened is when the habit is formed, this thick, the orange thick or the reddish thick matter that you see around the neuron is actually called myelin. So the myelin is a conductor that covers the neuron and transmit the information 100 times faster than it is normally done. This only happens when this actually becomes a habit. So event happen, A, your reaction, which is B, is a negative reaction. If that has been happening for years, that reaction, guess what? You've already built a habit of thinking like that, of behaving like that, and it's actually covered by myelin. The good news is that this is not permanent because of the notion and the theory of the neuroplasticity. And we can see in other events and circumstances, how can that be undone? So back to you, and let's share more information about this exciting saboteur and our internal operating system, Miriam.
Yeah. So what we'd like to do right now is look more at our internal operating system. And our internal operating system is actually our brain. And we're going to be looking at the structure of our minds in our brain and what happens inside of us. So as an event occurs, and that could be a conversation with a person, it could be a circumstances that I'm in, or even like a decision that I'm trying to take. So that happens outside of us. Automatically, what starts happening inside our brains and inside of our iOS is that we start making conclusions or interpretations about that event. We start making interpretations. We start making meaning and create stories regarding that event. Where do those stories or conclusions or meanings come from? They come from a lot of different places. It could be our past experience of similar events. It could be from our own personalities. It could be from our upbringing and what those people around us, whether our families, our friends, or even like schools and education systems have actually brought up with. Sometimes it's also society's expectations or norms being played around us. So I compare myself to those around me, and therefore based on comparing them or imagining what would they think or say, I start creating interpretations or conclusions about that event. Lawrence, if you can please proceed forward with one click. So after I have that meaning and that creation inside of my mind about the event, one thing starts happening. Of course, we have a response towards that event. So if it's a conversation, I have a response to that conversation. If it's a circumstance or a decision, then my response is taking a decision. But we have two kinds of decisions or responses related to that. One that we call the reactive response, and the other that we call the creative response. And the difference between those two is a reactive response, as you can see from the name of it, is more that an event happens and I'm just reacting based on what I felt or what I made as a conclusion without even noticing what's happening inside my iOS. While on the other hand, the creative response is the moment where I'm actually conscious of the meanings and the stories that are happening inside of my mind. I'm making a reality check of how much of that is actually true and how much of that is actually helpful and serving me or not. And then I come up with my response. In that case, I'm actually having a creative response. And naturally, with every response, we have an emotion and a behavior. And a behavior is whatever is seen is on the outside. So it could be something that I see or something that I hear. An emotion is more internal. So how am I feeling with the response that I actually went forward with? And naturally, based on your emotions and your behaviors, you get to see certain results. So after you've decided to either have a reactive or a creative response, you get to see some results. Subconsciously, a lot of people believe that an event happens and then we jump directly to having a reactive or a creative response, but this is not true. Each and every response, before it's actually being chosen, we actually go back to the iOS and the meaning. So be careful of that. If you want to be changing result, go back to your iOS. What's happening inside of your iOS and what's in your control to actually be changing the results.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing this science of the iOS. Ladies and gentlemen, you might be wondering what qualifies us for us to actually talk about career transitioning. What qualifies for us to talk about uncertainty? What qualifies for us to talk about risk, basically? So this is just to kind of quickly share with you a bit of about our background, basically. For those who doesn't know who I am, I was born in a war-ridden country where at the younger age, I decided to exit the country and move on my own, and I moved to Australia. I lived there for several years and I fell in love with the country, but I wasn't able to actually stay there. So I had to get resourceful, and obviously talking about moving to uncertainty, stepping outside of your comfort zone. If you can relate to that, I end up doing something completely out of my comfort zone, and I end up starting to become a cook. Obviously, you know, with the cooking, you get larger, obviously, as you could imagine. So basically, what ended up happening after I did that, I qualified for me to remain in Australia. So I made that my home country, and this is when I started my career. I started my career, and lo and behold, I was working in the beginning for Toyota. So I worked with Toyota for about 4 years, but I wanted to actually go ahead and become an international person. And that wasn't possible for me. And there was too much risk for me to actually exit that job or go elsewhere, because no company, or even my company, wasn't actually allowing me to transfer with them overseas. So I had to get resourceful and I had to exit my comfort zone. But for that to happen, that took several years and a lot of pain. And I'm sure that this is something that you can relate to when you have a desire that you want to achieve a change in your career, but you stay in your comfort zone and you don't change that. This is when I end up moving overseas, and I moved to Dubai and I started working for Louis Vuitton. I started working for Louis Vuitton and I stayed with them for 10 years. I wanted to become an international person, and they say, careful what you wish for. Boy, did I become an international person. So I ended up living in 5 countries in my life. And last country that I was living in was in Brazil. I lived there for about 5 years. And then I got bitten by this bug of, I matched my values for globalization. Now I wanted to become a kind of a person who can help people to become better versions of themselves beyond my team, beyond what's happening around my jurisdiction at work. So for me to do that, I had to also step out of my comfort zone, but that took a lot more time, because the more you scale up your career, and this is something perhaps that you can relate to, the harder for you to actually step out of your comfort zone, because you know you have too much of a competitive interest for you to lose. The stakes are high. Until I got to a stage once more that I was confronted by pain, ladies and gentlemen. This is when I decided to step out of my comfort zone in my, you know, glamorous, you know, golden cage, and I moved to become a career transition coach and a business coach, actually, ironically. And I've been doing this since the beginning of this year, and life couldn't get any better. So this is my story. And I just wanted to share that with you in order for you to kind of really learn that this too shall pass. It can happen. And, you know, it's not obviously impossible. So perhaps Mariam can share with us a bit more about her experience.
And thank you, Lauren, for sharing that very authentically, because a lot of times we focus on the glamour and the success stories, but it's also the journey and the road that we go through that actually makes it possible. So I started as being a little kid that kind of like plays it safe. I do all the good stuff. I'm doing everything correctly. I'm listening to my parents, and I'm kind of like walking beside the wall. When it comes to choosing my studies and my focus and what I want to really be doing when it comes to actually graduating and going to university, I chose economics. That was coming from a place of trying to be unique, but I had no clue what I wanted to be unique at, or what I'm actually talented in, or what I'm actually good at. Therefore, I chose economics. Why economics? Because it felt kind of like I'm definitely not going to be a doctor. I'm definitely not going to be an engineer. I was good at economics in school, so like, let's try that out. I actually did study economics at university and then graduated with high honors, and I was doing everything correctly. So like, I have that value of always wanting to be succeeding, even if I'm not enjoying the place I'm in. I graduated, typically just like any graduate, especially here in my country, the first thing that you do, you apply for a multinational career, because that's where safety and security and a career path is. And trying to be jumping in any other kind of company that it's not kind of like looked at as a prestigious or a thought for career. I've been there, I worked there for so long, as a business analyst, and the CFO was so happy with my performance. He's kind of like, okay, Mariam, you're the person upcoming next. And kind of like, it felt like my career path, if I would have stayed there, would have been easy, and I would have gone up that ladder. But continuously, the feeling of I'm in the right place, I'm not willing to give more, I'm not being ambitious, I'm not being proactive, I do not dream to be in the place of my manager, starting increasing. And in that time, I was still that little girl kind of like playing it safe. Like, I'm in the right job, there's a revolution happening in my country and all of that. There was no way that I was going to leave that company. But as that feeling started increasing and increasing, I decided to follow it. Did I know where I was going next? 100% uncertain. I decided to start knocking doors and try to see what's out there for me and try it. Worst case, I'll go back to corporate life. So my first door that I actually knocked was at the Learning Resource Center, where I was tutoring children with learning disabilities. It was such a rewarding job. And what I really discovered is more and more that I'm definitely a people's person, and just being me and Excel isn't the right thing. I definitely learned from each and every stage. So after being there in the Learning Resource Center and continuing to grow over there, I still continue to research what is it exactly for me that 100% hits home. And I started coming across coaching back in 2015. And that's almost 6 years ago. And as I started becoming a coach, everyone around me here did not know what coaching was. And it was very uncommon and kind of like 100% guarantee. There's no financial stability in that place. But the more I started getting into coaching more and more, the more I felt that I was really reaching the place that I dreamt of, but did not know what it was called. Gladly, I'm happy that I did not stick to what people were saying about coaching and about being a career here in Egypt, because 6 years down the road, those same people come back to me and tell me, like, you have developed so much, you're very passionate in what you're doing, you're enjoying it so much, and you're actually successful. And sometimes those are the people that actually refer me as a professional coach to others. And this is proof for you that you will be hearing lots of things to stop you in your road. But it's the matter of listening to them, or listening to your stronger inner voice that knows what's best for you.
Fabulous story. Thank you so much for sharing, Mariam, this authentic story as well. Time for more polls, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to be asking you 2 questions here. Can I actually ask you about the level of risk that you are willing to take when it comes to making important decisions, and whether you believe that you live a life on your own terms? So I'm going to be running the poll here. And if I can please get you to actually interact, I would really appreciate it. We are a very nice small group. So if everyone can vote on the poll, that would be fabulous. So you just click on the screen. I'll give you a few seconds, please. If you give your answer. Beautiful, thank you. A little bit more, half of us almost answering. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Fabulous. Right, so a couple of more seconds. There is actually 3 people that haven't answered. So, right, so I'm gonna be ending the poll and sharing the results. So looking at the results, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that the majority are really in the middle when it comes to taking risks. So we see that, 33% of the respondents are in the middle, but you have some people that are actually on the upper side, which is fabulous. It's great to know that this group is more inclined towards taking risk rather than not taking risk. The other thing is you get to live a life on your own terms. Also fabulous, because we see that life for several of you is on your own term. And we have equally 7 and 8 with 25%. So the reason I have asked you to participate in this poll, ladies and gentlemen, is I wanted to share with you a story. So the story of actually a nurse. She's based in Australia, and she had been working in a nursing home for several years. In fact, 28 years. Throughout this journey of 28 years, she'd been working with people who are on the edge of their life, meaning dying people at the end of the day. And what she did is she collated a lot of the regrets of these dying people, and she put it in a book. And then she actually wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. So the number 1 regret of the dying, ladies and gentlemen, is I wish if I have lived a life on my own terms. I wish if I have lived a life on my own terms. And one of the top 5 as well is if I have taken more risk in my life. I wish if I have taken more risk in my life. So I want to invite you for a quick imagination, visualization, and imagine yourself that you have reached the end of your life. Just imagine, hypothetically, and imagine that you are looking back at your life, where you are right now. And imagine that you have this dream job that we were talking about earlier, the dream career that you want to talk about, that you had in mind, that you wanted to have the desire to transition, but you haven't done that. And you're going to carry that until the end of your life. So therefore, you're not going to take that risk. Therefore, you're not going to live life on your own terms because you're driven by outside external factors, including factors that can influence the level of uncertainty within you. How would that look like at the end of your life, ladies and gentlemen? They say, if you want to make a decision today, don't ask yourself, what is the right or what is the wrong answer? The question that needs to be asked, ladies and gentlemen, is what would I decide if I am at the end of my life looking back at now? So which decision would you make if you were at your end of your life looking back at now? And that is the decision that you want to take, because that's a decision that you will not regret at the end of your life. And that is actually the reality. And I want you to think about that for a few seconds and let that marinate.
All right. So building question that killed most career question is, what would people say? If we look together at that question and the impact of that, it could come in so many forms. What would my family say if I made that move? What would my family say if I am willing to take a pay cut in my financials for a short period of time? What would the society say if I resign from that prestigious job? What would the employer say? Or what would my colleagues say? All of those are kind of like different ways to express that question. If we look at this graph together, as your career is developing after you make the move, the more and more it's actually developing, what you actually see as a relationship to your happiness and satisfaction, at times, you find it actually going down, although your career is developing, although you're moving towards success rates, although you are actually today better than yesterday. Then why is that happening? This is the moment that we start focusing on what others are saying, how people are actually evaluating us, how people are approving or disapproving of what we're doing, or are they acknowledging our career development as enough, or is it still not enough? And that's the voice of the saboteur. That's the voice that I've been through when I started hearing people's comments about coaching, as I mentioned earlier. The moment you start taking charge of your saboteurs, becoming aware of what are they saying and what's the impact of that, and the moment you start choosing to focus elsewhere, this is where your true happiness and satisfaction starts to grow. And that's one very important aspect to be focusing on, because sometimes we're actually moving towards a successful career development, and what's still not making us feel happy is that saboteur voice.
Fabulous. So let's talk about a quick notion when it comes to giving clarity to your career, or what's going to be next career. So this is the what they call the ikigai. The ikigai is a Japanese term that, if you translate it literally, means reason for being. So iki means reason, gai means being, reason for being. So that's about life purpose. So this is a actual diagram, Venn diagram, that was created by Mark Wynn. But the ikigai, if I may highlight, is not actually a diagram, it's actually a philosophy. But this is a diagram that was created for the career ikigai based on the philosophy of ikigai. So how does that, talk about, ikigai? So if you do what you love in your career and you do what you're good at, the combination of the two is your passion. If you do what you are good at and what you can get paid for, that is actually your profession. If you do what you can get paid for with what the world needs, this is your vocation. If you combine what the world needs with what you love, this is your mission. And the intersection of these four circles will make up your ikigai. The intersection of these four circles will make up your ikigai. If you split this circle, this Venn in half, and if you look at the lower part, you would realize that the lower part is more controlled by external factors. The upper part is more internal to us. So it's actually controlled by, to some extent, controlled by us, basically. Whereas this gives you a picture of where are you at today, because your ikigai, which includes all of these circles, is always going to be changing and varying depending on your value, depending on what's happening in the world, depending on a lot of circumstances and the external environment. So it's a picture of where are you at now. And as I mentioned to you earlier, with the uncertainty of the corona, what the world needs before the corona is completely different than what the world needs after the corona. And it helps you to kind of know yourself more internally, what's your passion, and know more about the market and your vocation and your mission, basically. And it helps you to break down bigger concept. Like if I ask you simply, tell me about your passion, is one way to ask a question. But if I ask you, tell me about what you love and what you are good at, and that would make up your passion, it would be a lot easier way for you to kind of understand your passion, understand your mission, but when you look at what you love and what you need, what the world needs, basically. So the other thing is about the ikigai. What ends up happening in general, people when they are starting their career or shifting their career, a lot of the time they look at what they can get paid for. This is what they start with, and they focus predominantly on what they can get paid for. What this result in is perhaps financial comfort, but a lot of emptiness. And then if you focus on what the world needs only, this is always shifting. As I mentioned, what the world needs before the corona is completely different than what the world needs after the corona, right? In terms of technology, in terms of working in the offices versus working at home, and all these elements, right? If you focus predominantly on what you love without having to cater for the other circles, you will be delighted, but you will not be gathering enough wealth. So therefore, there will be something still missing. And finally, if you focus on what you are good at, obviously you will be satisfied, but it will have the kind of a feeling of uselessness because it may not be in line with what the world needs, right? The answer is to start with what you love. This is where the answer is. This is where the art of fulfillment start. If you start looking for your ikigai based on what you love, ladies and gentlemen, this is when you actually start in the right place, identify your passion. When you identify your passion, which is the combination of what you love and what you are good at, then you move to the other circles in order for you to identify what is your ikigai at the end of the day. And as I said, that ikigai is actually a lifestyle, it's a philosophy. So hence we are talking about the art of fulfillment. So what I'm talking about, I'll give an example always, that Bill Gates, right, which he's an advocate of ikigai. He gets to do activities, small activities where he's connecting with his ikigai, connecting with his reason of being, connecting with actually slowing down, with actually incorporating being in the flow, being conscious. So these are also part of the philosophy of the ikigai. And when you combine all of these together, along with that philosophy of being conscious, being in the now and being in the flow, basically, that's how you can tap into the art of the fulfillment, which is a vast domain, obviously. It is like a volume knob. So I use that analogy because the closer you are to the ikigai, the more you're going to be feeling fulfilled. And you can also only control the internal world, as we mentioned. So to some extent, what you love change, but you can have some sort of control. But what you are good at is definitely something that you can have full control over it. In fact, what you should do is you have to always focus on what the world needs and see if anything from what the world needs, especially now with the corona, is something that you would be interested in or would be passionate about or you would love. Then if you're not good at it, go and get yourself good at it. And this is one way who doesn't have clarity, for example, to start, is looking at what the world needs and then, you know, seeing what the world needs, what is it that would interest me? And then if you see that you are good at it, so then you can go into that domain and start exploring what can be done, whether from an entrepreneurial standpoint or even from a corporate standpoint. And that's pretty much it. Values and ikigai are really kind of connecting together. So it is actually, the value is the blueprint of your ikigai, and they go hand in hand together. So you cannot attain your ikigai if you're not in line with the spectrum of your value. Now, how to identify the values, that's also another dimension that can be tapped into at later occasions, obviously. But we all know that we have values in life, basically, and that's the point. So from here, let's talk about the closing the myth and misconception. No?
Yeah, and you've received a great acknowledgement from Haifa here, Laurent, about the ikigai. Remember awesome. The 4 roadblocks that we spoke about at the beginning of this session: the mindset, the uncertainty, the capacity, and the financials. This is the simplest way to actually give you the keys to overcome those roadblocks. And we're starting with the mindset. And as Laurent have explained, the saboteur and the neurons behind the saboteurs, this is what we need to be changing. This is the mindset that we need to be growing and adopting in order to actually be able to move forward with our career transition. An example of that as well, Laurent, if we can
sure.
have a clip. Thank you. is unpacking your sabotaging mind, identifying your limiting beliefs, acknowledging that those are limiting beliefs and not facts. So that's a very important differentiation, but knowing that if it's a belief system or if it's actually 100% given fact that I have no control on. And as we have focused in this smaller picture about the saboteurs and the neurons, our autopilot is kind of like triggered by our fears, by our saboteurs. And this is why those pathways have been emphasized and are thicker. And this is where we resort to as an autopilot. If you want to be creating new pathways and new mindsets for moving forward, we need to be consciously and intentionally building those new neural pathways, repeating it more and more and more, reminding ourselves more and more and more, thinking of them on a daily basis, on an hourly basis if we need to, in order to strengthen those neurons and create those new habits and create those new pathways to make that new mindset that would be really serving me for the future as my new autopilot.
Fabulous, fabulous. So as you know, by now we have spoken about in the beginning, what are the main categories that we have identified that came from the research and from your answers that are the roadblocks basically, which makes up the, you know, the global myth and the misconception. So if we spoke about the mindset, now to speak about the uncertainty. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the main reasons people do not move forward is because when it comes to uncertainty, because the future is unknown. So here is a trick, because what we are talking about here is brain chemistry, is neuron connection. And how could you reframe, therefore hack into your brain? If you have this uncertainty, research have shown that there is a fear behind any uncertainty. That fear gonna be triggering a negative emotion. When that negative emotion is triggered, then the default system that you have created, obviously, as Mariam was talking about, is to default back to uncertainty and stay in your comfort zone. So what you end up doing is creating, right, coordinating, visualizing, simulating a future. So you might have to create two possibilities, a future that would be a positive scenario and a future that would be a negative scenario. And that, you know, the negative scenario will get to become a catalyst, ladies and gentlemen, for you, to trigger you, for you to actually go ahead and progress. And this is the kind of treatment in NLP that they do with people who are dealing with problems for addiction, people who are dealing with the smoking habits or bad smoking habits. So they actually go ahead and, because a lot of them, the reactions say, well, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing because I'm enjoying that. This is my comfort. But when you make the future more known rather than unknown, and perhaps introduce a fear of not doing something, this is where uncertainty will not become the default response. You'll be, hang on a second, my brain is telling me that if I go through the uncertainty, which what I was doing before, I might end up in that future that I don't want to end up in. So I might as well start changing the trajectory, the circuitry, the programming that I have in my brain, basically. And obviously on the piece of the clarity, which what we mentioned earlier, I just spoke about the Ikigai, that would be a solid, proven tool that personally I've been using. A lot of coaches out there have been using, that actually has been able to give clarity for professionals, basically. In terms of the capacity, we were talking that people that don't have time and they are really kind of busy, tied up in their life and all of that. My question to you, what are you doing after 9:30 at night? How do you spend your time? Here's the thing. A lot of the professionals that came to us, to me, to Mariam, to, you know, who are seeking career transition, they predominantly make that step when they feel the pain, when they feel the pain of being where they are. And this is what we are getting you to avoid, ladies and gentlemen, with this conversation, with this webinar and all that talk, basically. And there are a lot of tools that are out there, like the non-value added model, like the activities mapping, where you can identify how you actually spend your week and identify gaps and opportunities in your week to kind of eliminate them and replace them with more productive opportunities and activities, so to speak. So that's in terms of the capacity. The last piece.
Lastly, when it comes to the financial security, with the financial commitments, what we want to be learning is how to be creating a reserve, a financial safety or a safety net, as we call it, while we actually take that career transition, while we move forward and take that leap. And instead of looking at it as black or white, either I have my financially viable career or a fulfilling career, and it's either or, start to be creating a bridge, how to be saving, how to be using the concept of the 10% entrepreneur, be just using 10% of your monthly income in order to create that reserve, in order to be financially secure while you do that career transition, so that you decrease your fear and have more courage to do that and step into your more fulfilling careers.
Fabulous. So, you know, at the end of the day, really, don't take it from us, what we are sharing with you. Take it from the people that we actually have worked with. Take it with the people, from the people that actually have collaborated with us from the capacity of career transition. You know, whether myself or Mariam for that matter, we have our website set up and information set up, and there was a lot of testimonials that are available there where you can tap into the results of the work and how did that help people to actually transition in their career. And at the end of the day, what we are trying to do here is help people to go from point A, i.e. stasis, to point B, dream career or you know, dream job. And how could you close the gap between the two? Working on your mindset, working on the financials, working on every element of the equation that creates that transition. Because at the end of the day, it's almost like an equation. And we are trying to close the gap between the two without having you to go through the anxiety, without having you to go through the pain that most of the people that come to us have already gone through, that I have gone through, transitioning from one career to another career, and as well as Mariam, that what she have experienced. And I'm confident you believe, I mean, you relate to that story. That's why you are here with us today. And once more, kudos for you. Huh? So finally, last but not least.
And the exciting part that you've all been waiting for. As we come closer to the end of the webinar, I'd like to ask you a few questions and you'll find a poll appearing for you. Do you want to be discovering your own career ikigai with all the specifics and the details of how your ikigai looks like today? Do you want to start overcoming your saboteurs by identifying them and then unpacking them? Do you want to make it to a more financial and viable reality? Commit with that to yourself, and we'll be waiting for your answers in the poll.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So I can see all the anticipation and all the energy coming in. Help us out. It's growing. We are at 33%. You are left with 30 seconds to actually make it to 100%. So please help us to close this last poll, and promise you no more poll, no more question, no more touching screen, because it's so annoying. Huh? So go ahead and do that for us if you don't mind. Few more seconds. We are almost there, 66%. What's happening with the remaining? That's the last one. It's going to be the last, perhaps, you know, mind activity that you might do for the weekend. So go ahead, right? So we are at 78%. I will be ending the poll and sharing the results now. Thank you so much for your patience with us. Perhaps you want to tap into that, Mariam?
Yeah. So for the first questions, do you want to be discovering your own career ikigai? We have 55% as a 10, which is the highest score. And with the do you want to overcome your saboteurs, that's 100% and no discussion. Because we all feel the pain of the saboteurs. We all feel how they are limiting us. Do you want to make a purposeful career with a financial viable reality? 55%. And I think this is almost a consensus. Thank you very much for participating with that. And as we come to the end of today's webinar, We'd really like to thank you for attending here with us, and we really hope that you got what you were looking for